So welcome to the node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for June 7th, 2023. We'll follow our standard approach of going through the issues that were tagged for the agenda. But before we do that, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share?
Node.js 20.3 will be released tomorrow if the gods it is with me for some reason. So it's planned to tomorrow. So any update, I update the proposal.
Sounds good. Any other announcements? Okay, if not, I don't think we have any CPC or board meeting updates, as we don't have our representatives this week. Let's move on to the issues that are tagged for the agenda. So the first one is Node.js, Node.jip. So this is one that I know Richard added, but unfortunately can't make the meeting. I think it's related to an issue, as Richard mentioned, that I had forwarded on from Rod in terms of Node.jip and maintenance. And I guess our real challenge is that there aren't enough maintainers for Node.jip. And it's kind of like at the same time, people are trying to make changes and contribute changes. But they're not necessarily people that, are well known to the rest of the Node project. So it's not like an obvious, hey, we can hand this over to people who are trying to be active. And I think the ask in this issue is, well, like, how do we actually handle the situation? Node.jip is a key part of what we ship. How do we basically handle this particular situation? So I don't know if anybody else has had a chance to read or think about the issue.
Is the long-term plan to keep using Node.jip?
Well, I think that's all part of the discussion, right? Like there is no plan to do anything else that anybody's volunteered to do any work on, right? So I if it was a business, I would say like there's no staff plan, right? Like there's ideas, but we really don't have anybody. And until somebody volunteers to champion something, it's going to stay the way it is.
I thought there was a plan, just no people to implement it. Like I don't remember the plan, but I remember this discussed, I don't know, within a year or two ago. And it was like there was a thought through way forward that we were going to deprecate Node.jip and use something else, but I don't remember I think there was a consensus toward something, but I don't remember what it was. And yeah, clearly we don't have any volunteers for it, but maybe if we at least if someone remembers or could dig up the discussion, like if we could finalize that, like find the people on the TSC who are familiar with it and get them to all agree, oh yeah, this is what we'd agreed on. I still think it's the best plan. We can say somewhere like, yeah, this is our way forward. Then it's like, well, and maybe that's continuing to support Node.jip indefinitely. I don't know. But if we can at least decide on a way forward, then if there are these people who are hoping to volunteer time onto Node.jip, we either let them if Node.jip is the way forward, or we direct them towards whatever the replacement is.
Yeah, I mean, there is a comment in there from C. Klaus, who does help significantly on the Python side, because some of these are written in Python. It's basically like, hey, it would be really good if they're rewritten in JavaScript.
Well, yeah.
But the fundamental issue is finding somebody who will take some ownership of the issue, or
I want to say this has something to do with the SEA project or Electron or there was some other way of compiling C code for Node, or maybe these are nothing to do with any of this, but maybe some of the people involved in any of those efforts might remember about Node.jip or have opinions about it. So maybe if we could first identify who we could even be asking, and then we could kind of punt this into their court to investigate.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the ask, and the issue is that, hey, TSC, please think about and make this move forward.
Currently, we don't have any. I couldn't read all the thread, but basically, we don't have volunteers to work on that project, right?
No, I mean, I think what we have is like some people saying like, hey, I want to PR this change in for my particular use, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think Rod's point is like, you know, there's people who want to get things in. They haven't necessarily volunteered to maintain the whole thing. And even if they did, they're not, you know, if you volunteered to do that, he'd probably say, sure, here you go, right? But like before we hand over something that basically gets bundled into Node and is used, I believe, in every time you compile a native add-on, we would want to make sure we know who we're handing it over to, right? Is the challenge that goes along with it.
All right.
So it's really this is something that Rod has helped keep going. He really can't continue to do that and is feeling bad because like he doesn't have time, but people want to make contributions, but they're not happening. They're getting stalled, which I can understand. And it's causing him some stress that nothing's moving forward. And he's kind of like, help find somebody new to solve the problem.
Well, what happens if it becomes unmaintained?
I think the answer is node add-ons no longer work.
Yeah.
Or you mean eventually don't work?
At some point, right? Like, you know, they don't necessarily break tomorrow, but it's used to build any add-on. And there's like, I don't know, some early numbers were like 30% of every application, 30% of applications you install end up using one somewhere down in the tree. So yeah, potential, or it may not be that it falls over everywhere, but like say some new Windows version or something it no longer works on because it needs an update to be able to build on those versions, or some other platform stops working or something like that. And if we looked at the things that have landed most recently,
If we, I think one of the barriers is it's Python, and most of the committee is not experienced on that. I mean, expertise on that. I wonder if OpenJS could help with that refactor or that rewrite with some funds to someone to do that, so we can maintain, or it will be way easier to maintain at least.
right? Okay.
Well, that's if we decide that we want to keep it. I vaguely remember there was the preference was to replace it with something else, but I don't remember what the something else was. But
Okay,
I feel like we
Richard knows.
should at least dig up our old meeting notes from a few years ago and figure out when the last time we discussed this, what people who were close to it wanted to do. But yeah, if it's to improve and keep Node.js for sure.
Yeah, I currently I have no idea which was the replacement for that. I remember of that discussion, but I think even if we decide to replace, it will take quite some time. Like we still need to maintain the Node.js for some time until we replace everything, I guess. I'm like, besides the obvious part that is a huge breaking change for all the add-ons, right?
Was it?
If you're gonna say you want, if you like, you can use CMake to build add-ons today. So if you said nope, from now on you have to use CMake, that would be a huge breaking change. I think the proposal.
All right, I think I found I think I found what I was trying to remember. Issue from March. So I guess Python uses something called GN instead of node.js to build. And so we were gonna upstream something from GN to make it easier for them.
I think that's a
But-
different topic.
Well, it may be. I think there might be other discussions about node.js, but you know, I think this is the pertinent part in that, like, if node.js is trending towards abandonment, but GN is supported and actively developed, especially if there's like a team like Electron that's going to continue developing it, and I guess the V8 team, then maybe this is one of the ways forward that we should be considering, of like dropping support for native add-ons on the platforms that GN doesn't support, and JIP is replaced with GN.
I think
along those lines.
unfortunately that's a different topic. Like that's building Node itself and its dependencies. So JIP,
Oh, okay.
this is like JIP building. So we use JIP to build Node itself.
Yes,
And
and
saying,
for add-ons.
hey, can I put in GN files to build Node JIP? I think is different in that it's like a wrapper used in those add-ons. And so like we can change what we use to build Node without breaking everybody in the world. But we can't, if we change how add-ons are broken, we break every potentially all the ones that are out there, or a good portion of the native add. So I think our past discussions, even if we change from building, we drop JIP in Node, we couldn't necessarily drop that support for add-ons.
All right.
So unfortunately that one's slightly different. There may be other, I'm sure there's been discussions of this challenge before, but I think it's my remembrance has mostly been like, there's been ideas like, hey, we could rewrite it in something else, but we haven't necessarily, again, it's always come back to like, if somebody championed it, we'd probably be doing it, right?
Yeah, but even if we do rewrite, it won't solve the immediate need of people to support their use cases and review their code.
It at least would provide a path to having
Yeah.
a better story, right? Like you could say, well, we've got this plan. Unfortunately, it's going to suck for some amount of time because we don't have, you're not going to be able to get new stuff in, but our goal, where our belief is 6 months from now, when we've transitioned to something else, at least now you can start, there'll be a bigger pool of reviewers in our ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I was wondering, I mean, if there's a way to keep Node JIP for some time, like for at least 3 next major release, but also provide a new path of building, like you can build it with Node JIP, or you can build it with GN or something else, so they can transition it.
I think our problem is that like three times would not be enough. We started the Node add-on API like 6 to 8 years ago. And so far about 35% of add-ons use it versus the old way is I would put it. So a lot of them, it's just like, there's add-ons that are working and there's no updates and it's, and so it's just waiting. The 3 wouldn't necessarily avoid the problem of like, yeah, a lot of the ecosystem is still off. But
it will reduce at least like a major breaking change in a single release. Like we can tell to the active users, to the community, that we are transitioning. If they want to get the latest version of Node.js without breaking everything, that's the path. I don't think that we will be able to do it without breaking people, like eventually it will break.
Well, I think some of the suggestions of rewriting it in JavaScript, like Node JIP, that functionality could provide a path. Right? Like we
currently don't have problem with Node JIP, like it's just the maintenance burden.
I think the main thing is is there's maintenance, and I think the problems, I haven't followed it too closely. So maybe, you know, next time Richard or whoever can fill in a little bit more, but I think they tend to be like, hey, we've had some problem building on this platform. And so there needs to be a fix for something like that. I'm just looking at the most recent, you know, things that did land to see, like, you know, add support for native Windows ARM64 builds.
Mhm.
Get update JIP PY to work with Python greater than 3.5.
We have a thing for add-ons. We do, right? We can maybe raise an issue, but there are a lot of open issues on Windows, I can see.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that, like, this is and that's why the suggestions of rewriting in JavaScript is that this requires Python expertise versus anything else.
I'm gonna have to leave in a few minutes if we want to move on to that.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we're not going to solve this here, but it is something that, you know, in your suggestion, like if we did decide that like a port made sense and would help the maintenance issue, then, you know, asking the foundation for dollars to fund that port might be, it's, you know, something to try and see if we could get that, right? Because that would be like a targeted, hey, we need some help. And then we believe that people would be able to help maintain more easily, right? If that's,
Yeah, if this project does not have any other problem, I think that's a good approach.
right. The other one too is like, yeah, we could ask, I mean, part of it is like asking as broadly as we can, is there somebody else in the existing, in our existing set of collaborators who is interested to take on more ownership? You know, become the reviewer, and, you know, in terms of that. So, you know, asking, you know, the Node add-on API team possibly, although it's like a different skill set. And or possibly the tooling team. I don't know, Roy, if you've been involved there, whether people, you know, would have skills, might be interested.
Yeah, we might try to just flow the idea, right, and see if there's interest.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is module make CGS load from ESM loader. I don't know, Jeffrey, if you have context on that one, if you added it.
I think that's Antoine's.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Antoine.
Sorry, which one are we talking about?
Module make CGS load from ESM loader.
Yeah, Matteo added it on the agenda for visibility.
Okay.
I don't think there's much to discuss at this moment.
Okay.
But yeah, please have a look. Yeah.
I think, and the offshoot of it was an issue that Stephen Bellinger posted on the TSC repo yesterday. Basically asking for more process around breaking changes for experimental features.
Sorry, can you say that again, just for the minutes?
He opened an issue basically asking for more process around breaking changes for experimental features.
Okay.
And response so
You have
far
that
has
issue? Do you know where?
been-
You know
what
where that issue was?
That
or-
issue? Yeah, it's TSC 1397.
Okay, I'm just gonna add that into the minutes.
I mean, the response from the people who replied so far has basically been like, yeah, these features are experimental, but it is what it is, kind of thing. So I don't know if anyone else feels otherwise. I think Steven's point of view is that, like, well, when something's been experimental for years, at some point it becomes de facto stable or something to that effect. But we're kind of like, well, that's not what the rules say, and maybe that's how you're treating it, but you know, according to our doc, experimental, and things can change, can and will change, and that's it. If you don't want to accept that, then don't use experimental features. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything anyone wanted to discuss about this, or any disagreement with that stance that we've been taking.
I think this kind of comes down to do we have the right? Are we correct in doing this? And what is the practical consequences of doing that? I don't know if being right really matters so much if we're actually harming the ecosystem, but
I think for me, it also comes down to, did we make a conscious choice? So like if we look at the ESM one, or the loaders one, if we'd known ahead of time and made a choice that we were making a breaking change, then versus we accidentally made a breaking change, that would factor into my feeling as to whether we should revert or not, right? Like if we think it through, we decide we're going to break break things because we need to do it and it's the right thing. Great. If it's an accident, maybe it does make sense for us to revert and then figure out what the right answer is, right? Over time.
But the problem there, that reasoning, then it has nothing to do whether it's experimental or not. We reason like that with normal stuff also.
Sure.
Yeah. So the experimental is kind of a shortcut where we don't need that reasoning. We can just break it because we have said that this is going to break. But if people haven't listened to us that this is going to break, and then we break them, then that has consequences, right?
Yeah.
And yes, politically, it helps us if we can say, well, you guys, we told you guys this is experimental. So, that's your problem that we broke it. That's one approach, of course.
It's true. Yeah, no, I see your point. It should be like we do that for regular ones.
Yeah, but the fact it was pushed to the major release kind of implies we did make a decision to potentially break things.
It was a major refactor. I mean, it was 8 months of effort with like maybe a dozen contributors, hundreds of commits. So it's not like a little change that is easy to revert. Like, and there's been many PRs built on top of it. So it's sort of like ripping out a whole new implementation to revert that. So yeah, we thought, I mean, we didn't know in particular that we were going to break anyone, and like it wasn't like we knew there were no deliberate breaking changes. It was more that like this changes a lot of stuff. There's a good chance there could be breaking changes that affect people in this. It was finished a few days before the deadline for the V20 cutoff, so we were like, yeah, that's a great date to release it on. So that's kind of how it happened.
Are we talking about this specific instance now, or is this instance just an example of the problem with?
Well, I'm talking about the loaders off thread change, which Stephen is complaining about. He made a comment on Antoine's PR because Antoine's PR, to him at first glance, seemed like it would be similar. But then he looked into it more and he doesn't think it's going to cause any breaking changes. So now it's like maybe nothing to worry about situation. Either way, he's definitely like aware of it. So now like he can test it before it lands and let us know if it breaks anything, and then we can try to remediate if possible, or just point to the label again, like, hey, it's experimental. But anyway, just letting you know where like the history of these changes.
I can think of another example. Let's say Happy Eyeballs has caused a lot of people breaking their application. And I think it's not unexpected that if you'll upgrade a major Node.js version, you have to do things in order for them to work. The thing is, I'm not sure we have solutions for everything yet.
So just to take a step back here, because I think this conversation at its root is about the experimental flag and what that means or doesn't mean. So as far as I see experimental right now, that means that we don't need to put so much thought into whether this is breaking or not and what it does to the ecosystem, because we've told the ecosystem that don't use this for real stuff. The problem is that people ignore that, and then everybody's
Right.
using stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So the experimental flag doesn't actually do anything then, because then even if something is marked experimental, we still need to consider it as if it wasn't.
Is it-
I feel, Sorry.
I need to drop in a second because I kind of just say one thing and then I'm gonna go.
Sure, sure.
I agree with that, but I also say like I don't think we have much choice but to say it is what we say it is, because we just don't have we don't have the manpower or the staff to do otherwise. Like to put this change under a flag, so now we have two entire, loader implementations within the repo or something like that, would have been a tremendous amount of additional work that we just don't have the resources for. So even if we wanted to do what he's requesting essentially, which is to like make development even slower, make it even more opt-in, make it even more gated, et cetera, I don't think we can. And so it's a question of choosing to keep progressing towards our goals of finishing these experimental APIs or not, because slowing them down as much as he's asking for means they just don't get finished, and we end up with more APIs that just are experimental and abandoned, essentially, that never get finished. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I feel that we are missing one step. That is, we need to organize and create some document or create something to say what is the expectations from an experimental feature. Because I see we are creating experimental features using different terminologies or different proposals. One is to collect feedback. The second is just because it's not meant for production now. The other one is because we are testing it now. So there are some expectations. There are different expectations on different experimental features. So it's not clear even for me what are the expectations from a security experimental security feature or any experimental feature. For instance, are we it should be secure by default or not? Obviously, yes, but I mean, it's expected to contain some security flaws in this. I don't know. It's expected to break something. For me, even experimental features, I think the breaking change is just the last option of an experimental feature. Just because we are creating an experimental feature, I don't think we are telling them that we will break it at some moment. It's just, I just feel that this is an experimental feature because we are trying to collect feedback from the community instead of.
Sometimes that's the case. I think your point is and I think Jeffrey put some work into trying to define additional experimental levels. In some cases it's still experimental, but really we want people to use it and give us feedback just so that we confirm it's good, and then we'll unflip the experimental. Other things, we've just thrown it in there so that we can learn, right? Almost. Sorry, Rodney, you want to put you have your hand
Robert.
up? Robert, sorry,
Yeah.
Robert, yeah.
Yeah, so even if we do document it, how many people or users are actually going to read that?
Yeah,
they're going to read experimental. I think everybody knows that experimental means, okay, this, I shouldn't probably use this in production. Whether, there are different levels of experimental, sure, if people actually read that, that can be valuable, but I don't think in practice anyone actually going to read that and it's going to make any difference in the ecosystem. Other than that we can say, oh, but we have documented it over here.
I feel that that's not only for the community, but for Node.js members as well. Like when we are about to include an experimental feature, we go to that document and validate if that met all the requirements. I mean, I wouldn't say that I will approve a pull request that says in the end that it will break after some months. So like we are intent to create a breaking change in that experimental feature.
I think the issue we're trying to to solve or think about is an issue with the ecosystem. I don't feel like the internal node collaborators are really an issue we should handle. Like
But the problem is not because we are discussing an experimental feature that will break at some moment, that will contain a breaking change in some moment. So go ahead, Rui. You are mute.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to mention one thing here, that I'm not sure the experimental like type of flags are that problematic on themselves, right? Like I think the core issue here is that maybe like an experiment that lasted like maybe too long and it's like too vital for the ecosystem, right? Reading that like seems very important for folks want to adopt ESM, and like, yeah, I'm kind of guilty myself. Like I've been relying on it to run some TypeScript on the fly tests, and yeah, now they're broken on Node 20 and I have to fix them. So I think that might be like kind of more the issue that we should be looking at, and not try to reevaluate the entirety of the experimental flags, right?
Robert?
Just very crazy idea. For future experimental flags, what if node env is production, experimental features are turned off? Just putting it out there for thought. Because then we don't end up with...
You mean the breaking runtime, like the crash on the startup?
Yeah, if you use experimental stuff, then and node env is set to production, then it just won't start.
Don't we discourage use of node env?
Yeah,
Possibly.
Okay.
I think that there are some folks using things on production, and like just testing stuff, even with the production flag. And we probably would like to keep that thing working, like to receive feedbacks, receive reports, and so on.
Another option is to do it like Chrome does and opt into experimental stuff. Then you raise the barrier a little bit.
Is that opt-in?
We can have quite a long discussion on this, and I think we might have to move on to keep some room for private discussion, because like that same thing, like we start with, the one thing I'll say is we often start with a flag, but then we remove the flag so that we can actually get more people testing it. And we have this balance between we want people to try it versus. But I it's worth, I think, having the discussion so that we can feel better maybe in a bad situation, which is going to happen, I think, is some people's points. Like there is no good answer here, and it's going to happen. And if we can somehow not have to re-agonize every time, maybe we'll be happier. So. Yeah, so back in that issue, I put it in the minutes. So if you have thoughts, I would say let's go back and continue that. And we probably should put that on the TSC agenda if it's not already there, just as a, we started the discussion there. I'll add the label just to make sure we don't forget it. Okay, so let's move on to Node.js, CLI tools behind a Node.js namespace. This is number 1178. I'm trying to remember the context. It was when it was put on the agenda. So I guess Danielle added it to the agenda. Maybe we'll just leave it on the agenda until we make sure that it's covered, the discussion that she wanted us to have. I know we did get one of the namespaces. So Node Core is now owned by Node Foundation users, so we can start using it. Actually, no, it wasn't Node Core. It was, yeah, Node Core. And then I think Ethan mentioned in one of the other issues that we need another one, which I think is Node.js. I did request that. I couldn't find out who used it, but I made the request, which may take some number of weeks. So I don't know if there's anybody has something else to discuss on that.
Well, I think we might just want to start working on it. I know Antoine started working on the node core utils. So maybe you could just comment that we want to start migrating packages and
Yeah, I think like it's okay. I'm happy to put on like, okay, to start migrating packages.
because I think it's
Node
like a
core
third.
namespace.
This
And-
was on the agenda for like 3 meetings with no concrete discussion.
So I'm just gonna say discuss in meeting today. Those in attendance. Agreed, it's okay to agreed. It should be. It'd be okay to start migrating packages in the core namespace as we have the namespace. Space and no objections have been raised, right? We're not necessarily making a decision for the TSC here, but we're commenting that like nobody's objected to using that and moving some of our tools there. And we have the namespace, so hey, should be good to go ahead, right?
Do we know if there's any action to take except changing the name of the package? Package.json?
I think what we did on FastFi side, we did a pretty similar approach. So we released one major version with no content in that package, just a warning whenever someone wants to run, telling that it was renamed. And then we created that package from that specific version, one measure above. Like for instance, if we are using that version 2, we create a version 3 with no content and a warning, and we create another package with the correct name in the version 4. That's what we did on FastFi and worked pretty well. We have an CLI that did it for us, so maybe we can use it on Node.
You want to paste
And-
that suggestion into that issue?
Yeah,
Like
let
if you
me find
pasted,
it.
hey, on Fastify, this is what we did, the pattern worked well. I think that would be good to have it captured there.
Okay.
And just the warning, is it like npm deprecate thing?
Yes.
Or and
Exactly.
can we do that? Yeah, I don't have access to the bot, so maybe someone needs to have access to the bot and run the command. Because I think it's the bot account.
Yeah, I don't have
that,
permission to do that. Yeah,
permission.
needs admin permissions.
To do what?
We need admin permissions. The one that we run the script need admin permissions to do that.
To run npm deprecate.
Yes.
So folks using the old name, not to migrate.
So
Can
that's,
we,
you mean it needs to be an admin in NPM?
Yeah, in the npm organization, in both in the packaged current package and in the new package scope in the organization.
Okay. Right. So this may be the first time we're actually trying to use like organization features. Because we had that user mostly as a backup in the past. But
Mhm.
now it is the owner of our scopes. So like we may have to figure out if we need to give people like say the TSC members admin access to that, or I don't know how that works actually. Roy can probably help us there. How should we manage the people in in those organizations?
I think we have different roles. I think you can give right access to maybe the all TSC, right? Something like that. I think I think we can manage it like that.
So I think, when we go through the first one, we can identify the issues and then we should actually document, okay, how do we overcome this particular issue to make it so it's not a one-off every time? Okay, so I made a comment that Raphael's going to comment in 1178 on that, and then we'll work through the issues. I think we should move on so we still have some private time.
Yeah.
The last one is archive node.js help in favor of help section on discussions. Just seeing who added that.
I
the
think it
agenda.
was Claudio.
Okay, so as Benjamin added it to the TSC agenda. I think it would almost be good to have Jarish. Like, let's defer to a meeting where we have Jarish, because he's been active there and has some strong feelings. So I think he could help the TSC understand those. And I think we need the rest of our time to discuss the private issues, unless anybody has, something you think we should talk about this week. Okay. Okay, so at this point, I think we should close out. Does anybody have any issues or topics we should discuss before we do that? If not, thank you very much for your